All right, guys, and we're live here for another episode of Rangers Review. I know it's only been a couple days since the last one, but again, if you guys did not check out the other day's episode, please make sure you do. It just came out a couple of days ago. We talked about not the Rangers games like we normally do for our weekly recap, but this time we changed things up a bit and wanted to really break down what has the news been with the Rangers the past week, not just from the trade deadline and what the Rangers didn't do, but what they did do with Zach Jones, signing him, and everything in between. So make sure to check that out, guys, if you haven't already, because that one still holds true to this point in time. But now we're talking about our weekly recap, and that's exactly what we'll be doing. We'll even be doing a brief recap on the week before that because we didn't have an episode out. But before we get into anything else, Steven, how are you doing today, my friend?
Good. Yeah, another Monday. One of my last Mondays in Austria before I relocate. Starting to slowly put things into boxes. But yeah, it's been fun watching the Rangers the last couple of weeks. Not because they're winning, but because the kids are doing well.
Yes, the kids are doing well. And I think that's almost an understatement at this point, which is so great to say. I have to be quite frank. And when we look at the Rangers, let's just quickly recap here before we get into the past week for them. Let's get into the 2 weeks ago, because there were 3 games I do not believe we touched on. And that was the week of April 4th. And that just started with the Rangers blowout win against the Pittsburgh Penguins, 8-4. What was your initial stance on that game from what you recall, and what players stood out to you? Because that one was very eventful, even though it was short-lived when you look up to their second game that week against the Pens. What was your initial stance on that?
Look, anytime the Rangers score 8+ goals in a game, it's memorable. And the Rangers have done it 3 times this season. I think the last time they had 3 games with at least 8 goals was 91-92.
Yeah, it's been a while.
That was, you're probably too young to remember this. Were you born in 91, 92?
No. New millennium right here.
The Rangers were one of the Stanley Cup favorites. I think they won the President's Trophy that year. And then they lost in the playoffs to the Penguins.
How ironic.
And it's what I remember most. I was still young. I was like 7, 8 years old. What I remember from that series is the most memorable part of that series. Adam Graves slashing Mario Lemieux and I think breaking his wrist. Yeah, that was overall a really, really successful season. And then 2 years later, they won the cup. So here's hoping for 2020. But yeah, scoring 8 goals in a game is never a bad thing. Yeah, they gave up 4, but this tends to happen. You don't see a lot of games where the score is 8-0. It's always 8-3, 8-4, 8-5 because when you score 8 goals, you tend to lose focus a little bit on defense, which is fine. Beating the Penguins, always a good thing in my book. I despise them more than any other team. I don't really have a problem with the Flyers, the Islanders, or the Devils. But the Penguins, oh man, if we can beat the Penguins, my day, that makes my day.
That's interesting that the Penguins, I know why the Penguins are your least favorite, if you will, but it is still interesting coming from a Rangers fan that doesn't have the Flyers or the Islanders or Devils, the easier picks than many would believe over them. But you're also not from the area, so maybe that's a part of it too.
Exactly. I didn't grow up in New York, so I don't have the geographical rivalry, going through my veins. I don't like the Penguins because I started watching hockey in the early 90s when they won back-to-back cups. And then I lived through that whole Jágr and Lemieux thing, and then Lemieux retired, and then he went into the Hall of Fame, and then he came back. It's like none of the rules applied to the Penguins for some reason in the late 90s and early 2000s. And then, of course, they end up winning the draft lottery for Sidney Crosby, and then they win another cup in 2009, and they win back-to-back in 2016 and 17. So, yeah, I have a little bit of a problem with the Penguins, more so than the Devils, Islanders, or Flyers. So when we beat the Penguins, it's a good day for me.
Yeah, and that's you have great reasoning there. I don't blame you at all. I'm not to say I'm a Pens fan is the farthest thing from the truth. Let's be honest here. But a guy that really stood out to me in that game for the Rangers was obviously Panarin. He had 4 points. Chytil had a really good game. He had 2 points as well, if I recall. Igor was big in that game too. Even though the Rangers won 8-4, he still had over 40 saves. So a lot of guys were getting multiple points in that game, and overall it was a strong win for them. Then when you get on to the loss that for the Rangers, that was a tough one. We don't really have to talk about much. They lose 2-5 that game in their second game against Pittsburgh that week. And, it is what it is. They had a rough one that time. They just couldn't really get much going, and the Pens took advantage of the opportunities given to them. And then the day right after that, on a back-to-back in Long Island against the Islanders, the Rangers won 4-1. And that was a big win for the Rangers. And that's kind of when everything really, in my mind, started to trend more upward after having some fairly inconsistencies the previous couple weeks. That Islanders game really stood out to me. And the Rangers, for them, that game, Georgiev stood on his head, as he normally does against the Isles. He saved 31 of 32 in that game in the victory. And if you look at the point producers in that game, too, Artemi Panarin once again leading the way with 2 points, kind of effortless. And Rangers they really just took advantage against the Islanders that game. And it was a tighter game, it seemed like at first, but the Rangers they were on top the entire time. And to catch the Islanders a little off guard like that, it's not easy to beat the Islanders, let alone in a game with more than 2 goals for a lead. They're so defensively sound and structured. Even when they're kind of, faltering a little bit, they normally step up against the Rangers. And then
Barry Trotz implemented that into their system.
Yeah, and it's worked flawlessly. Yeah. It was somewhat there with I believe his name Jack Capuano. I'm probably saying his name wrong. Their former head coach.
The guy that looks like Fred Flintstone.
Yeah, exactly. They were defensively minded for a bit. Honestly, I'm going back to the Jarl Halak, Tomas Greiss days. They always did really well against the Rangers. Now we see a similar trend with Semyon Varlamov and now Ilya Samsonov, who is a good friend of Igor's, as we know.
Sorokin.
I was literally going to say Sorokin. I don't know why I'm thinking
Samsonov is with the
Russians. Why do they have to be so similar to me?
There are so many Russian goalies in not just the NHL, but especially in our division now.
I know, and I love it. It is so I absolutely love it. Russian goaltenders are a different breed, and I love it. As long as they don't have the peak and then the downfall fairly as quick as Sergei Bobrovsky, I'm all for it.
Or Brizgalov.
Yeah, Briz is fun, though. I can't even talk crap on Briz if I want.
But he had a shorter career than you usually expect from a goalie.
Yeah. He tried to stay in, but it just didn't work. Like, why you have to be mad, Yeah. But let's get in now to the past week of games for the Rangers, because it started off on a bad note, but it wasn't a bad game for the Rangers all that much. It was just unfortunate. The Rangers lose in overtime to the Islanders 3-2. What was your quick stance on that game to really get things rolling for the Rangers, and what would then be 4 straight games against the rivals and the New Jersey Devils?
Look, the Islanders are still a better team than the Rangers at this point in time. It might be different next season, but this season the Islanders are just a better team. They added 2 big pieces at the deadline in Travis Zajac and Kyle Palmieri. Defensively, they're sound. They have 2 good goalies. We already talked about them. So losing in overtime to the Islanders, I don't really feel that bad about it. They could have won, but overtime is just, I don't know. Overtime's gotten so boring, man. Over the last 2 years, when they first switched it to 3-on-3, it was exciting, and then they figured out that it's all about possession. So now they don't take any risks.
Yeah.
I remember one of the last games Jimmy Vesey played for the Rangers. He dumped the puck in overtime. He got to the red line, dumped the puck, and went for a line change. And I was like, "Are you serious?
It's all about keep away. Keep away." Kevin Hayes will tell you back.
It gave me an idea. Maybe they should implement the rule they have in basketball. In basketball, you're not allowed to go backwards across the halfway line. When you have the ball, right?
Oh yeah. You can't go once you're past half court. You can't go.
Half court. Sorry, that's what they call it, half court. Once you're past half court, you cannot go back.
Yeah.
Yes. That needs to be something in the NHL in 3-on-3 overtime. Once you cross the red line, you're not allowed to circle back.
Or what about a shot clock? Just for fun, now that we're thinking outside the box. Once you enter the offensive zone, you have 20 to 30 seconds where you have to cycle the puck and get a shot off.
Shot clock could work. Who knows? But it's
going to be very stressful the entire time. It's going to keep everyone on their toes.
They need to do something because this is clearly not working. But back to your point, they lost in overtime to the Islanders. Not the worst thing in the world. They got a point out of it against a team that's ranked higher than them. And that point might be the deciding factor at the end of the season because, we now won 4 games in a row against the Devils, which we'll go into in a minute. But everyone's looking at the Bruins. And I've been saying for weeks now that we're not going to make the playoffs. But specifically, I said we're not going to pass the Bruins in the standings. But we might pass the Islanders with the way they've been playing.
Yeah, no, the Islanders, they've been on a little bit of a downward spiral. And it's kind of funny because they did the exact same thing last season. I don't know if people seem to realize that, but the Islanders were really strong in the first half. Then the second half, right until the season reached the pause because of COVID and everything, they were continuing to lose and lose. And I really felt that they would not have made playoffs if everything was trending. The Rangers were continuing to trend upward. The Rangers, like right now, were a couple games out of the last spot, like for the wild card at the time. And I was like, okay, Islanders continue to fall. I honestly think the Islanders would fall there. And obviously everything changed with the format and all that, but the Islanders are showing a lot of very strong similarities to last season and how they've approached the second half of the year, even with it being a shortened season. And while the Rangers did lose that game, and it wasn't a great game, I will still take that for the Rangers because in the end of the day, they had Libor Hayek and Brendan Smith be their goal scorers, just like we all drew up for that game. So the offense just wasn't there, but it was a kind of a fluky game, but one that I don't think the Rangers played all that bad. Islanders kind of did what Islanders do best. They were making the Rangers force a lot of shots from the outside, I remember. And, it's just one of those things. At least the Rangers got a point out of it in the end.
We did get Kravtsov's first point out of that game too, by the way.
What's that?
We did get Kravtsov's first NHL point out of that game.
Yes, we did. Yeah, assist on, I believe, was it Smith's goal?
I think Smith, yeah.
Yeah, that was awesome. But either way, the Rangers lose that game in game 41 of the season, but then they get to game 42 against the Devils, and oh boy, the Devils had no clue what was coming to them. And even with them getting some goal scoring here after the first couple games, you can tell this is a team clearly in a rebuild. Now the youngest team in the league after trading away both Zajac and Palmieri to the Islanders. So the Rangers are not the youngest team in the league. They're close, but the Devils take over that throne for now. And Rangers win the first game of 4.
Just wait until we replace Brandon Smith with Nils Lundqvist next season.
I know. Just think about that.
We might be the youngest again.
We may very well be the youngest again. You're not wrong. But the Rangers win this game and only get 20 shots off, but they win 3-0. And what a fantastic game for the Rangers here. Just did everything structured well. A fantastic shutout. The one of 2 shutouts for Igor Shesterkin, who, again, like we talked about in our previous Rangers review just the other day, Igor had back-to-back shutouts for the first time as a New York Rangers goaltender since over 94 years. It's been insane how long that span was. Yes, insane. So Zibanejad, Panarin, and Buchnevich are your goal scorers in that game, all doing what we would expect. Mika continuing to produce, maybe not at a 6-point per game base, but still getting a goal or a goal and assist here is always great. Panarin
that should have been another Kravtsov assist.
It should have. You're right. I know. But then it was called back as we previously discussed because, of course, Lindy Ruff decided to challenge and it was offside. So
no. That was the goal. I was talking about his assist on the Zibanejad goal.
Oh, pardon me. I'm thinking of the offside.
But that yes. I mean, it's been a crazy week for Kravtsov. He should have ended up with 4 points this week.
And he ended up with 2.
Yeah.
That's okay, though, because if you do recall, and I believe I said this in the previous Rangers review just the other day, Kravtsov would get his first NHL goal this weekend, and that's exactly what he did. So we'll be talking about that in a minute. But then we get on now to the second game for the Rangers, and they shut them out again, 4-0. Offense just continues to topple over. The Devils, they had no shots. I believe they had under 20 shots that game. It was not strong. The Rangers dominated once again, 33 shots to 16 now to be exact. And your goal scorers for that game really stood out. You have guys like we're going to see right here, Jacob Trouba, Artemi Panarin, 3 points, 2 goals, 1 assist. Surprise, surprise. Ryan Strome with 2 apples as well. Colin Blackwell with 3 points on the night, really contributing on that second line. And at that point, he's been right around or close to 10 points in his last 10 games. Close to, it might have changed because of the weekend, but he's been solid. I have to give credit where credit's due.
You're not mentioning the most important one that game, Ryan Lindgren getting his first goal.
Yes. No, I was about to get to it. Yes, Lundgren got his first goal on the season. Not a guy that you're going to get much goal scoring from, but very happy, especially after the couple games ago, you get Brendan Smith and Libor Hayek. Defensemen are starting to contribute. Trouba got a goal in that game as well. So happy all around for the Rangers. They get shutouts back-to-back there. And then we get on to what was a little bit of a dramatic game, what would end up being the next 2 dramatic games for the Rangers at first. They win 6-3 against the Devils this past Saturday, but the Rangers had a 3-0 lead, then became 3-1, and then the Devils scored 2 more goals in the third, but the Rangers were luckily able to add on even more, get those insurance goals. They won 6-3. And what stood out the most to you about that game over this weekend in particular?
The Saturday game, the fact that we scored 2 empty net goals in one game is something we don't really see that often as Ranger fans. I think we scored 2 power play goals on the power play that included a 5-on-3.
Yeah. No, I'll actually double check how many power play goals we got that game.
Because early on, we got a power play.
3 on the power play.
Yes, and then there was another power play. So we had a 5-on-3. We scored on the 5-on-3, and then we scored on the subsequent 5-on-4 power play. So it doesn't happen that much either for Ranger fans to see their team score on a 5-on-3 and then again on the subsequent power play. But what stood out most is obviously Pavel Buchnevich becoming the first Ranger ever to get a birthday hat trick in the NHL. I mean, when he scored his first goal, I was already typing. I was already tweeting like, Rangers are the first team since. I don't even remember, or like that to have 2 players score on their birthday. First season since like 2008 to have 2 players score on their birthday in the same season, and then he scored a second one, and then it was Blackwell and Buchnevich both having 2 on their birthday, and then eventually the hat trick was just amazing. The game. If you were at that game, you were lucky to have witnessed that, because that's something on par with Zibanejad's 5-goal game.
Absolutely.
And Zibanejad's 2 6-point games. If you attended any of those games this season, you witnessed history, because, like I said, Buchnevich is the first Ranger ever to score a hat trick on his birthday.
And that's so cool. I love the fact that it's for Booch, because I have such a soft spot for him. And
it's his first hat trick in the NHL, and that first career hat trick. And
that's a great point too. Yeah, that was just a fantastic game all around. Panarin doing what he does best, spreading the apples. He had 3 assists, 4 points on the night. Ryan Strome, a goal and 2 assists. He continues to produce. He's been fantastic. Kreider got a goal, which was great to see, considering he's been quite dead. And this was something that I've talked about with you plenty, how I love Kreider, but my only concern with him is when he's hot, don't get me wrong, he is hot. He's rolling. But then when he's off that hot streak, he's ice cold. It's not like you have that scoring every other game or every 2 games even. Like, he will go ice cold for a straight week 2+. And that's been evident again this season. I don't know why. It's just something that he's just been a streaky goal scorer in his career, unfortunately, whether it's because of an injury or something else. But it was great to see him at least get a goal there and try to get back in the groove of things. Yeah. You get Lindgren with 2 assists as well.
One thing, though, because we always talk about this with Chris Kreider, that he's streaky. But you have to understand that aside from the absolute top players in the league, every player is streaky.
Oh, well, yeah. I'm not saying he's the only one. I'm just saying for what his utilization with the Rangers has been, and hoping that maybe he would get over that hurdle, because there was a belief at first that, okay, he's a 20-goal guy. We know that. Oh, he's really pushing 30 now. Just how high is his ceiling? We've now come to the realization that, like, what we're seeing is easily what we're going to be getting. If not, maybe a little.
Great value for a 19th overall pick in 2009.
Yes, I agree.
We shouldn't be disappointed with what Kreider has topped out as. He's still good value for where he was picked.
Yeah, no, he's not a continuous all-star or anything like that, but he's unbelievably valuable to this club, especially when you think of playoffs. And hopefully he will still be with this club when the Rangers, maybe even as soon as the season, have a playoff run in them. It's guys like him that you need with that veteran leadership, that experience, because look, he just jumped out of the gate coming from BC into the playoffs, made quite the impact for the Rangers.
So, that was such a great experience too.
I know. I remember it like it was yesterday.
To watch a kid jump in, and I remember, I think it was against the Capitals, where he scored that breakaway slap shot.
Yes, on Holtby. And that was like Holtby first coming in the league too. So it was awesome. Yeah. No, Kreider's a beauty.
The picture of him and Del Zotto on their knees celebrating the goal afterwards.
Yeah.
I think I had that picture framed on my wall for years, because it was such a memorable moment for me as a Rangers fan, because that was the first real playoff run after I moved back from South Africa, after I really got back into watching hockey again. And seeing them, like that team in 2011, 2012, I really had a connection with that team. Guys like Anisimov, Dubinsky, Girardi, not so much Callahan. For some reason, I was never really a Callahan fan, but
Interesting.
Kreider then came in and he just put up that performance. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. To see a kid like just come in like that. Yeah, that was much.
So if my memory is not mistaken, Kreider was called up into that series because Hagelin was dealing with a suspension against Ottawa. Is that correct? Because I feel like that's why Kreider was called up.
No, I think Dubinsky had a suspension because he was the third man in the fight.
I remember Hagelin got a suspension. Maybe it was the next year's series. It was something.
What I remember in 2012 is Dubinsky being ejected from the game.
I remember that. I remember him
tossing the Gatorade can or the powder. Yeah.
Yep.
So maybe it was Dubinsky, but we'll just have to look that up. But that was such a surprise signing at the time, and people were like, "Oh, here comes a kid from college. He's going to be on the fourth line," and boom,
high flyer. That's me. The speed.
Unfortunately for Kreider, that raised the expectations to the point where people were expecting him to score 30, 40 goals every year.
Yeah.
And we never really got that out of him, but still, he got that empty net goal on Saturday. And then yesterday, he gets the first goal on the power play.
Yes, and be exactly what he should be doing. Just plotted right in front of the net. Easy, open net, no problem getting that cross crease pass through. But the Rangers, again, win this one, and Buchnevich with the 3 goals, Manjad with 3 apples. Great all around. Rangers were looking a little lackluster in that third period, and kind of the same thing throughout the second half of the game yesterday, where the Rangers, well, at the time recording this, it might be 2 days by the time you guys see this, but they won 5-3 in the series sweep, if you want to call it. It's like a 4-series set in baseball, right? Rangers sweep this one against the Devils 5-3. They continue to tack on the goals, and Breadman stood out to me again, 2 apples, but Ryan Strome, man, he had 2 points on the day, another goal, another assist. He continues to produce. He's been, it's so nice talking pleasantly about Ryan Strome. I feel like I've been saying that for a couple of weeks now, but
he has earned it this season.
He has absolutely earned it, and this was such a make or break year for him in my mind, where same thing with D'Angelo, and we know what happened there, unfortunately. It's like, okay, these guys are basically on bridge deals. I know it's not bridge because they're UFAs at the end of it, but the same structure, 2 years, they're getting just around $4 million or so, and it's going to be big. It's going to really dictate what we do with them and if they'll be part of our future. One of them, unfortunately, for more reasons than one, won't be with us, but Strome, at least, man, he's just stepped up, on pace for over 70 points, as we discussed in the previous episode, for a normal 82-game season. And it's really going to make the Rangers and a good problem to have on how they want to weigh their future with Ryan Strome, possibly for long-term being their 2C.
If the Rangers win a Stanley Cup in the next 5 years, Jeff Gordon deserves a statue outside of Madison Square Garden for you. It's unbelievable how he turned 6 weeks of Rick Nash into Keandre Miller, Ryan Lindgren, and Ryan Strome. Then, for some reason, convinced Panarin to sign with us, even though the Islanders offered him more money. That's my favorite part. That's my favorite part still.
The Rangers fell into a good spot there with Panarin, because Panarin, from everything that I learned, he always wanted to be in a big market. He enjoyed his time in Chicago, but he really wanted to be there, be in the Big Apple. So the Rangers lucked out with destination and cap on their side.
But the Ryan Strome trade is linked to Panarin signing as a free agent in a way.
And how would you explain that?
They offered him $11 million, and he initially didn't sign. And then they still had retained salary on the books for Ryan Spooner, because they traded Ryan Spooner for Ryan Strome, who was then subsequently traded to the Vancouver Canucks. And then the Vancouver Canucks decided to buy him out.
Yep.
And they freed up $600,000 in cap space.
Oh, I remember that.
$6 million, and he signed. So
it was all meant to be, is what it feels like.
It's all meant to be. It all fits together like a puzzle. And it's amazing to see this team come together. And last night, Kravtsov gets his first goal. Or for me, last night, it was 3 p.m. in New York, but for me, it was 9 p.m. So when I say last night, just you understand why. Kravtsov got his first goal, which is great. A little bit of a scare with Georgiev early on, with the
Yes, that was a little bizarre. And before we get to Georgiev, I just wanted to expand a little bit on Vitali's goal because one, that was beautiful 1-2 in the right dot, slipped it right. It wasn't perfectly in the corner, but he slipped it kind of right through the armpit. It looked like a Blackwood as he was coming over from right to left. Set up, great pass by Howden, might I add. Howden isn't all that
bad. Now.
Yeah, we gotta extend Howden long term now, right? He can't go anywhere. But no, great goal by Vitali. You could tell in his presser post game how excited he was. It's awesome to hear how well he is with his English too. I'm impressed by that. I know that he's been doing that for a little bit now since the Rangers first drafted him, but I thought that was great too, though, just knowing that he doesn't need a full-on interpreter for everything that he's answering. It makes life easier for him.
And the thing with Kravtsov compared to Panarin is just the way Kravtsov grew up. I think his mom's a diplomat. His sister is a lawyer. She lives up in Calgary. His dad was in the Soviet army, so he was surrounded by high-ranking officials as a kid. So he heard people speak English around him all the time when he was little. So that really helps him adjust to speaking English more so than guys like Shesterkin and Panarin, who didn't really grow up in that type of environment. So that's a big difference. But it was also Kravtsov's own effort that he put into it. After he was drafted by the Rangers, he played his first post-draft season with Troktor Chelyabinsk in Russia, and he was playing with Nick Byland, who's, I think, Canadian. And I spoke to them a few times, and he actually asked Nick to help him translate certain things, to help him improve his English. So he put the effort in himself, but also the way he grew up, the way he was raised, certainly played a part in that as well. But yeah, Kravtsov getting his first goal is big. Finally, he's on the board after his previous goal was called back. Rightfully so, because it was offside. But he finally got his first goal against Lindy Ruff, so justice there. And he's just playing a really good, solid, mature game. It's not just he's no longer the opportunistic kid that I saw a year and a half ago in preseason in New York. Yeah. When he played those preseason games in New York, he was dangling his way through opponents, and he wasn't really back checking much. It was like he was playing an exhibition game, which preseason technically is, but you're still playing for something. You're playing
because he's trying to show off his skills right away,
You're playing like for fringe players. Preseason games are serious business because you're trying to force your way onto the team.
Oh, absolutely.
And he just didn't really play with that urgency. He was just out there having fun. And that wasn't really enough to earn a spot on the team, which resulted in him being disappointed, which I get. But looking at him now and compared to a year and a half ago, it's like night and day. So seeing Kakko come into his own, Lafreniere being more and more comfortable, you can see Lafreniere when he's on the bench. He looks like he's been in the NHL for 5 years.
I know. He's very observant. He's very vocal. Just his normal routines have transitioned smoothly from the QMJHL or the Q. I might be saying it wrong. You know what I'm talking about though. Go back into the NHL. What's that?
Call it the Q.
The Q. Okay. But regardless though, he's looked great. And I also want to expand a little bit on Laffy because he had a goal yesterday, and that was a little bit interesting too, because it was a beautiful, it was a pass originally to set up. Who passed it to Laff again?
It was a touch pass to Hedel, who then went side and he passed it to the middle to Laff.
It was two passes in a row that were behind the forwards. Hedel touch pass was a little bit behind him when he got along the right side. Then when it was cross crease on a 2-on-1 to Laff, it was behind him, and then he turned around right away and got a 5-hole on Blackwood, and then he was shoved in the net by Tennyson. Tennyson finishes his check, but he roughed up both Lafreniere and Blackwood. Net went off and all that stuff. A little bit of a scrum, but no, it was a normal kind of play. Another great goal, though. Lafreniere now has 8 goals on the season.
Yes, but that scrum, that's what I like about last night's game. Yes, the goals are nice, and Kravtsov gets his first goal, and it's important. But when Lafreniere was checked into Blackwell by Tennyson, the first person to skate over to Tennyson in front of was Kakko.
Yeah.
And that's I don't want my future stars getting into fist fights. What I do want my future stars to do is to stand up for their teammates. And he did.
Yeah.
And he
absolutely.
did. And earlier in the game, there was a hit. Trouba had a hit on who did he hit in the first period?
Oh, and then it caused a fight. Yep.
Which gave us the first power play.
Yes.
Because he came after Trouba. And Trouba is always there to take care of himself, to stand up for himself.
Mm-hmm.
But Lafreniere was down and out. He needed a couple of seconds to recover. And Kako skates over immediately and confronts Tennis. That's what you want to see. You want that camaraderie from your future stars. And then a couple of minutes later, or in the third period, there was it in the third period? No, I think also in the second period, Lindgren skating into the corner, and
yes,
the rookie, what's his name?
Sharangovich?
I don't know if it was Studenic or Sharangovich, but I think it was Studenic who pulled Lindgren down.
Yeah, I remember that.
First into the board, and it was Lafreniere who was the first one there to stand up for Lindgren. That's what you want your future stars to do. And I was really happy to see that. But overall, we won another game against the Devils. And for the funniest bit for me yesterday was Ryan Strome scoring without putting the puck in the net.
I know.
There's his famous Wayne Gretzky quote, right? You miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Yeah, unless you're Ryan Strome.
Rick Nash had a similar goal a couple of years ago for the Rangers, where he was on a breakaway with an empty net. He was hooked on the play. I think it was against the Coyotes, and he was awarded the goal without actually putting the puck in the net.
Yeah.
So I like those weird moments that you don't see every day.
No, I do too. And I want to expand quick on what happened earlier because we didn't get a chance to touch on it. But yeah, Georgiev worried me big time at first. Looked like he was hurt. I believe it was maybe in the first period. And it was the first or the second. I think it was the first though. And he was it looks like that he was definitely struggling with his left leg. And then he ends up getting taken off, needing help from Ramsey, and everyone gained helped off the ice. And then Igor comes in, he only faces 2 shots, but luckily Georgiev, I believe, comes back in the second. And then from his post-game presser, I think he had to do it as a knee. I think it honestly popped out of the socket or something along those lines, and they just popped it back in. And he was good to go.
From what I heard, it's something that I've had myself when I was about 12 years old. His knee just locked up. You stretch your leg and you cannot bend your leg anymore. And if you're lucky, you can just pop it back into your socket. It's gonna sting a little bit, but you'll be fine. And I think that's what was the case. They just used the intermission to make sure he was okay. And then second period starts and he's out there. I mean, imagine what it must be like for the Devils.
I know.
You prepare to play Georgiev, then Shesterkin comes in, you adapt your game plan. Then you come out for the second period, and Georgiev's back.
And I will give credit where credit's due. The Devils took advantage of some fairly sloppy plays by the Rangers defense going to the third, and ended up getting tied 3-3 when their game was originally 3-1. And
3-0 actually, it was 3-0.
Yes, it was 3-0 originally. But luckily the Rangers still prevail in the end. A late goal on the birthday for Mr. Mika Zibanejad, and then Ryan Strome to end things off. So that was great as well. Another guy getting their birthday goal. And if you look at the point producers as a whole, Zibanejad had 2 points on the game. Hedl had an assist. Blackwell had an assist as well. Kako, Foxy continuing to rack up points. I want to talk about him here briefly. Howden, Kreider, and then Strome 2 points. Panarin 2 points. And Lafreniere with his goal. So overall, a strong outing. Georgiev, not the most fantastic one, but he got the job done in the end. And the Rangers, what I love about them is even when they're giving up a couple goals, if they say slack off a little bit, when we saw in the past 2 games against the Devils, is that they still are able to add insurance at the end. It's like, okay, maybe we had a little bit bad start to the third or something. We're going to get back in the groove now and wake up. We're not trying to put ourselves in position. We need points. Every single game matters. It always does, but especially now with the home stretch with just over 10 or so games now left in the season. There isn't too many left. So Rangers now find themselves still 2 points out of a playoff spot to the Boston Bruins, but they just continue to win. And they have a big week upcoming that we will talk about shortly. But before we get to that, Steven, I want to throw some stats galore at you, shall we? Because there's a lot of numbers we need to throw out.
You're the one doing the stats today.
Yes, I'm doing my best Snapboy Steven impression. So, okay, if we look at the Rangers, their point leaders, as a surprise to nobody, Artemi Panarin, 52 points in just over 30 games, might I add. Everyone, it kind of feels like we forgot about his absence for weeks because of the whole political situation. Then you get Ryan Strome second with the team, 44 points. It's been around a point per game, if not higher all season. That's fantastic. Adam Fox, who a guy last season in his rookie year was producing a lot, but wasn't getting too much time on the power play, and the points just weren't there, and that was ultimately his downfall in the Calder race in the end, coming fourth right out of Dominic Kubalik. I believe he cracked third in that race, but he's been fantastic this year, point per game basically. Pavel Buchnevich. Buch has had a historic season, not just because of his birthday, the hat trick, all that good stuff. He has consistently been producing all season long, almost every single game. And he's defensively responsible. Seriously, Buchnevich is a guy that is going to be due for his contract, but as of now, it's like, how do you justify getting rid of him? Maybe you have him part of a bigger package if you really want to do something groundbreaking. But other than that, Buchnevich has proven me wrong in a little bit of ways. I've had my ups and downs. I looked at Buch, and he struggled with me in the past, being a little lackadaisical with going in the offensive zone, getting a shot off, maybe leaning his head back one too many times, just being a little slow. I feel like when he brings up the rush a lot of times, how he skates, it worries me sometimes, honestly. He was very snake bitten last season. This year, however, completely different story. He's the most complete player we have ever seen, and has continued to do that night in and night out. Yeah. And what do you want to say about Mr.
Quickly on Buchnevich. Buchnevich and Kreider are currently tied for goals with 19.
Yes.
I just quickly looked it up because I was curious. That is the 13th highest in the league, 19 goals.
Wow, that's solid. I didn't realize they were actually that high. So the Rangers have been flying with their offense the past month or so, especially. And I'm gonna.
It was help when you score 5+ goals every game, but yeah,
I know, and it's feeling effortless. It reminds me a couple years ago. I think it was either AV's. I actually think it might have been AV's first year with the club. The Rangers just. First or second year, the Rangers just scored 5 goals after 5 goals to start the season for like the first 2 weeks. It was insane. That's what we're starting to see more and more with the Rangers as of late, which I love. Of course, you love the high goal scoring as long as the defense can be at least average, and the Rangers defense has been solid all year long. But Zibanejad then 39 points on the season after that terrible start due to the COVID and all these different factors, being snake bitten, just not hitting the net. He's been rolling, and then Kreider's sixth on the team in points with 28, and then everything starts to drop off with the youngsters as we kind of figure. Igor Shesterkin, the main goaltender for the Rangers this year, 13-9-3 on the season, a 2.28 goals allowed average, and a 925 save percentage. Full season, he could very well be pushing for Vezina. We'll see what happens this year, but he's been on a tremendous pace really since he's come back from his injury. And over the last 10 games for the Rangers, they're 7-1-2. They've been one of the hottest teams in the NHL. And if we go back all the way to March 13th, this was a stat originally thrown out from NBC Sports yesterday prior to the game starting, but I added with the points, and it's changed now. Since March 13th, over a month ago, the Rangers have 4 players, that are top 4 in the league in points of all the league. We're talking about past McKinnon and Ranson and these others, because Colorado had their game postponed yesterday, so the Rangers were able to leapfrog in some of the points. Panarin has led the league in points for the past month plus, 34 points in the last 20 games. Zibanejad is tied for second with Nathan McKinnon with 30 points in 20 games. Then if you get to the 4th spot, because I'm including the ties, we'll jump right to 4th. Fox and Strome are both tied with 26 points apiece. Foxy just has the edge by 1 game, 19 games to 20. But the Rangers have been one of the hottest teams in the league the past month plus. Huge kudos to David Quinn again, and Knobloch really starting to get things going. Panarin staying in his groove. Everything has been tremendous. So what's your stance on that with the Rangers? I know that they've been high flying with their offense, but they've literally been the top dogs in all the NHL, along with the Colorado Avalanche, as they should.
Yeah. I still think that the 2 weeks Chris Knobloch, Chris Drury, and Jacques Martin were behind the bench really changed the dynamic of this team. And this is not a knock on David Quinn. It's just an observation. The team plays differently since then. And yes, I know Panarin came back, but they didn't play like this before Panarin took his leave of absence. Mm-hmm. They didn't play this way. So something changed. And I'm happy it changed, because maybe it will get us over the hump. Maybe it will put us on track to become that playoff team next season. But if you look at our scoring, I mean, Matt Barzal is leading the Islanders in points. He would rank 6th on the Rangers right now in points. We have 5 players outscoring the top point producer on the Islanders. It's unbelievable.
And that should not really come as a surprise, I will say, because the Islanders are no offensive dynamo. As good as Barzal is, he doesn't. When you look at the guys around him, and now when you have their captain and Lee, who's been out with injury, like, you know, there just isn't much there. Like, how much is, say, Kyle Palmieri? How much is Zajac? Guys that are not going to be crazy point producers for you. Like, that isn't as good of an oomph as I think it could have been for them. And Barzal's a fantastic player. He's so entertained. I hate to go up against the guy because he normally makes great things happen, but he also has not put up the points like he has since his rookie year with Tavares. And it makes you wonder, you know, will he be able to get over that hump himself, or will he kind of need someone alongside him as he continues to grow too?
It could be that the focus with the Islanders is just on defense now under Barry Trotz. It could be that that's the case.
Yeah.
You know, maybe Barzal is one of those players that has a great rookie season and never matches those numbers again. It happens sometimes. You know, best example is, of course, Teemu Selanne, who
we talked about this.
Never broke his own record for goals or points after his rookie season. Not that he was a bad player, but his rookie season is statistically his best season in his career. But yeah, I would still take Matt Barzal over Ryan Strome. If you give me the option to pick either one of them at their current cap hit, I will pick Matt Barzal any day over Ryan Strome. However, if you look at Ryan Strome this season, 44 points in 45 games, he has more points than Anze Kopitar, Alex Ovechkin, Sebastian Aho, Patrice Bergeron, John Tavares, David Pasternak, Matt Barzal, Braden Point, TJ Oshie. It's unbelievable the season he's had. And I hope we can finally put this whole but he plays with Panarin thing to rest, because Strome is so much more than a product of Panarin. They work well together. They feed off each other. It's not a one-way street. And this week, Strome has scored some goals that I cannot attribute to just because of Panarin. There was one goal that he scored from a really tight angle. That was a really difficult goal to score. Holy shit, that was a really good goal. Then he had the 2 assists on Panarin on breakaways. Those are pinpoint passes. Yes, Panarin is great at finishing them, but you still have to get the puck all over the opponent's stick and onto Panarin's blade. It's not that easy. And you saw it on breakaways with Lafreniere and Kakko. There was a breakaway, I think yesterday or Saturday, 2-on-1 breakaway, and the puck doesn't get to Kakko because Lafreniere hesitates for like a fraction of a second. Ryan Strome doesn't hesitate because he has that experience. He has the skill. He has the talent. He was a 5th or 6th overall pick. Let's not forget that.
Yep.
This is not some 4th round pick that is just playing well because he plays with a star. Like people always say about Chris Kunitz and Pascal Dupuis. And
I was thinking Kunitz during this entire time. It's funny you mentioned him. Yeah, exactly. Like there are players out there that fully take advantage of the opportunities given to them, but they know that as soon as that opportunity is taken away, that you're not going to get you might get half of what you originally were getting, because they reap the benefits of the guys around them, but they also they're not slowing them down. They're just adding on, and that is, in my mind, what Strome is doing here. And then some. And what separates him from like a Kunitz, and this is not a shot at Chris Kunitz or anything like that. I'm saying, though, that Strome has found that next level to his game. And luckily for him, he has also found that level while getting plenty of help, advice, and just playmaking and production with one of the best players in the league along his left wing. That's all it is.
And if you look at Panarin's totals with the Blackhawks, then with the Blue Jackets, and now with the Rangers, playing with Ryan Strome and Jesper Fast his first season, and now mostly Ryan Strome and what are you pointing at?
No, I'm saying it just continues to trend upward. He keeps going upward.
So now he's playing with Strome and Kako or Blackwell or Kravtsov. It differs a little bit, but Artemi Panarin last season on an 82 game pace, he was on pace for 113 points.
That's decent.
This season, he's on pace for 125.
Remarkable.
If this was an 82 game season, he is most likely breaking Jágr's franchise record for points in a season. That's how good Panarin is playing with Strome.
Exactly. And it's one of those things where it's like, you can't say, oh, things would be different if one is without the other, because it's like, we can't control the fact that they're probably going to just stay together. You know, if Strome gets extended long term, they may very well be line mates for the next 5 years.
And there is no guarantee that Panarin puts up this type of production playing with another center. There is no guarantee that will happen. So with Panarin under contract for another 5 years, another 4 years next summer, I would have no problem signing Ryan Strome to a 4-year extension and have their contract sync up.
Mm-hmm. And
then maybe Strome is not the center that we're going to replace. Maybe Benet's the one.
You know, and that's going to be a very interesting topic that we will dive into as the season reaches a close. If the Rangers make playoffs or not, all that fun stuff. But no, you're right. A lot of things are going to be changing. Again, the Rangers are right in the heart of the rebuild. People need to realize that. As entertained as this team is right now, to suggest that this is going to be the same core group fully in the next 2 years, I can't fully stand by that just yet. I need to see commitment from the Rangers side of things before I can jump to that conclusion.
Yeah, and we have some cap space to play with for the next year or two. Mm-hmm. So it'll be interesting to see how Jeff Gorton will use that cap space. I just don't see a scenario where they get rid of Pavel Buchnevich.
Yeah, I mean, he's done everything possible to make sure you don't get rid of him.
It's really hard to justify getting rid of him. Yes, I know Kako is going to be really good, and I know Kravtsov is going to be really good. They're not going to be really good or good enough next season to make up for the production you lose when you trade away Buchnevich.
Yeah,
and if this was 2018, trade Buchnevich away because you're still 3-4 years away from contending. But we are on the cusp of being a playoff team again. I honestly believe that next season we're going to be a playoff team. The Flyers are getting older. The Islanders are getting older. And we've been saying this for the last 2 years. These teams get older every time. But the Rangers are getting better. The Rangers are improving. Their young kids are contributing now. And at the start of the season, I was a cynic because I didn't really see Kako having the season he's having now. Yeah, production-wise, it's still not great, but he's having an impact. I didn't expect Adam Fox to play like a Norris caliber defenseman. I didn't expect Keandre Miller to come out of the gate and play second pair minutes with ease.
Biggest surprise of the season, I would argue.
I didn't expect Kravtsov to come over at the end of the season and be as comfortable as he is on the ice.
Neither did I.
Everything just comes together now. And I don't know if I think I had this conversation with you in one of our previous recordings, but if you go back 12 months, you understand why they signed Kreider to an extension and why they traded for Julien Gauthier. Because they needed to have wingers that they could count on. But then in the 12 months since, you draft Lafreniere first overall. Kako takes a huge step in his development. Kravtsov comes back and actually plays NHL caliber hockey. And all of a sudden, Gauthier is a healthy scratch, and Kreider looks like the worst extension in the last 10 years for the Rangers.
Yep.
But with the power of hindsight, anyone could be a Hall of Fame general manager, I guess. If you look at the situation a year ago, the moves make sense. Even though I wasn't a fan of the Kreider extension at the time, it made sense from an organizational point of view, I guess. But next season, this team's going to compete. I don't see a scenario where Buchnevich is not part of this team.
No, I don't either. The only one exception I would say to Buchnevich not being with the club, say heading into next season, like during the offseason something happens, is if it really is like a groundbreaking deal. If the Rangers do in fact go all in on Jack Eichel and Buchnevich is one of the more prominent assets going the other way. Now, would that make a lot of sense from the Sabres side of things? No, it really wouldn't. especially because of how much of a hole you're making with Eichel as it is. As Zibanejad would make the most sense. Could they be together? Sure. But outside of something that massive, I don't see how the Rangers get rid of him. They don't need a trade for a top 4 defenseman. That's out of the picture. What we were thinking over the past offseason was honestly at certain times was foolish on my part because I was thinking too short term when realizing, one, I didn't think that K'Andre Miller would step up the way he did this year. I did not think that I didn't even think he'd be with the club for a majority of the season. That was a plus. Now you see Zach Jones now with the club. He should be getting games sooner than later. Niels Lundqvist, we beat this all to a dead horse, but the Rangers defensive core group is set and they still have guys coming over the next year or two. So they have more. They have more and more, and they're quality defensemen. It's not like they're just fillers. They're not Libor Hayeks, nothing against Libor, but these are guys that have the utmost potential, and obviously that potential needs to blossom into production. I fully understand that, but with the trend that we have seen already with guys like Lindgren that had very low expectations initially, Adam Fox with knowing that he was really good, but not really realizing that he was Norris caliber good, kind of right from the gate, and Jacob Trouba refining his game. He's had a much better season, especially the second half, than he did his last year. I've been fairly impressed with Trouba. He's definitely correcting my wrongs and a lot of the statements I made about him in the past, and that's good. That's all I asked for. He's overpaid, but that those things happen. When you look at K'Andre Miller, he's had a little hiccups lately. I know that you touched on that on social media too, but especially for a rookie, that's natural, and I'm really not concerned about him. But then you're going to have Niels Lundqvist, Zach Jones. These are guys that very well out of the gate can be performing just up to similar levels as the guys the top 4 in front of them. So unless the Rangers do a blockbuster with Buchnevich being part of it, I don't see any shape or form I guess. And he's an RFA. It's not like this is a UFA situation. You still have control over him, and that's key to these negotiations too, whether they extend him to say a 2-year deal like a Ryan Strome thing, or if they extend him to a 3-4 year deal. Who knows?
Yeah, that's the thing. He's not like you said, he's not an unrestricted free agent this summer, so you don't have to pull the trigger now. You can assign him what they did with Kevin Hayes. It's not ideal, but they can do what they did with Kevin Hayes. You sign him to a 1-year extension, and then you just kick the can down the road. You worry about it next year.
Yep.
And then you can trade him at the deadline next year. But this Rangers team is going places, and it's been a fun rebuild so far. And I'm looking forward to seeing these kids make the team, being consistent contributors on this team. And yeah, this is what's important. And you've seen my tweet about the rolling entry-level contracts.
Yep.
It's important to have those entry-level contracts coming onto the team and contributing, because that's how you keep your salary cap low.
Exactly.
And next season we'll have Jones and Lundqvist, and then the season after that, hopefully we'll have Robertson and Schneider. Mm-hmm. And the season after that, we might see Carl Henriksen make the team if he progresses the right way, or maybe Adam Edstrom or Morgan Barron, and maybe not necessarily entry-level contracts, but if their entry-level contracts run out before they make the NHL, their second contract will be relatively cheap. That's still a good deal to have on your team. But you need at least 3 players contributing on contracts that are below $1.5 million a year.
To keep things afloat, to keep things breathable, Because
otherwise you end up like the Vegas Golden Knights, I think last season.
Yep.
They went in 3 years from an expansion team to being up against the cap, having to trade players away. It's crazy. Or the Islanders paying $4 million for Matt Martin. He's a good 4th-line player. Is he worth $4 million a year?
And what did that lead to in one way or another? Trading away a really, really good defenseman, Devon Toews, just for 2 second-round picks. Don't forget that one. He's very, very underrated.
Yes. And what's important for the Rangers is that they make the right choices, they make the right decisions. And if they're going to make a trade, make sure it's the right trade. I suggested a trade with the LA Kings because they have a lot of center prospects and we have a lot of defensive prospects. Mm-hmm. It's a match made in heaven. You can go either Matt Robertson for Rasmus Kupari, or maybe Braden Schneider for Gabriel Vilardi. Or if you really want to aim high, you can do something around Niels Lundqvist for Turcotte. I'm
Well,
not advocating for any of these trades in particular, but the LA Kings are a team that you can negotiate with if you want to use a position of strength to address a weakness.
and that's why there's actually been a lot of rumors out there. It's kind of funny, though. It's not to address a position of weakness, it's to address something that's already full strength, and that's Jack Eichel. Because when you look at the possibility of Eichel with the Rangers that we talked about, and I'm sure it'll be a reoccurring topic in the offseason, probably throughout the entire offseason until something happens, which it may very well. We'll see, given his injury and everything. But the Rangers have plenty of assets to make a deal happen, where they can make a lot of different kind of trades happen for Buffalo, should it be at the right price. The LA Kings are the other team that really stand out with such an amazing prospect pool. But that could end up being the decider in the end, which would be unfortunate. It won't be an end all. It'll be, okay, he's in the West now. But Eichel, if he went to the Kings, they've shown interest reportedly as of late from numerous tweets that I've seen. And the Kings do have that luxury where we have a lot of top young centerman prospects that we could send Buffalo's way. So they're going to be in this rebuild, but they're going to have guys that they can continue to grow with and work with money, because Buffalo doesn't have much money that they usually work with. They're a cheaper organization, unfortunately. And I feel bad for them. That goes down to their ownership and everything. But that is the one thing that I will say on that matter too, is if the Rangers get a deal done with, say, Buffalo, they'll have to be fairly creative, because I know the Kings will be knocking on the door.
Yeah, and the Kings have the luxury of not having to send big money the other way.
Mm-hmm.
The Kings have some. They have the Kovalchuk termination coming off the books. They have the Dion Phaneuf buyout coming off the books, plus the cap space they already have. The Kings are in a position where they can make it work by sending them just prospects, or maybe sending them a player that has $2 million on the books.
Yeah, I will.
If the Rangers trade for him, I honestly don't see a scenario where Eichel is traded to the Rangers and the Rangers still have Trouba, Kreider, and Zibanejad on the team.
No, absolutely no way. I honestly think. Go on.
Yeah, the LA Kings have much more flexibility cap-wise to make a trade happen. Also, they are on the other side of the country. They're in the Western Conference. And we both know that general managers are still idiots, because they would rather trade for a lesser package if the player goes to the other conference than accept a bigger package from a player in their own conference or their own division. Look at what the Ottawa Senators did with Mike Hoffman.
Yep.
They traded him to San Jose, and then San Jose turned around and they traded him to the Florida Panthers for a better package.
Yep.
General managers are idiots. They don't go for the best package. They think, oh, I don't want to play this guy for 4 times a year. Who cares? Go for the best package. Accept a package that helps you as a team. Don't worry about where the player is going.
Because you don't even know if you have the certainty if the player will end up still staying with that team. San Jose.
And then a year later, they trade Erik Karlsson to the San Jose Sharks. And they put this ridiculous condition into one of the second-round picks that if Erik Karlsson plays in the Eastern Conference in the next year and a half, the second-round pick becomes a first-round pick. That's how terrified they were. It's absolutely ridiculous. Just go for the package that helps you the most. Stop caring about where a player is going.
And
I would trade Zibanejad to the Penguins if it got me the best offer.
Absolutely. You're right. And that's a great thing. Look, as much as it sucks to see maybe a guy that we've grown attachment to, that we love on the rival club, these things do happen. Maybe not fairly often, because teams do worry about this. You're right. GMs do worry about this more often than not. But if it does happen, it should be at the right price. And I could see that being the case. And it's funny when you think about Zibanejad, Trouba, and Kreider, because you're 100%. I don't see how the Rangers, don't get me wrong, they're creative as hell. Jeff Gordon is very sneaky good with his decision-making. Could they try to do something with keeping both Zibanejad and Eichel on the same club? They could. I just find that hard to believe from the Sabres side of things. But at the same time, how much does Zibanejad benefit the Sabres when you're getting rid of your franchise player? Or what kind of structure are you in as a club at that point from the Sabres perspective? Because you drop down Zibanejad, even if he produces great still, he's older than Eichel. He's due for a big payday. That doesn't add up with a team that if they're getting rid of Eichel, they're going into a rebuild again, which is really unfortunate. Sucks for Sabres fans. No ifs, ands, buts about it. That's the truth. But that's what's kind of confusing to me here, because I would assume, and again, maybe I'm overlooking this. Maybe Buffalo isn't as competent as that. But if you're going to get rid of Eichel, and it's kind of like you're in the corner, he doesn't want to stay here. You just got to get rid of him. You want the biggest haul possible. What kind of haul is that going to be? Are you going to let Dylan Cousins try to come in and be your number one, give him top 6 playing time throughout the entirety of next season and beyond? Is that what you're looking for? Those are the kind of factors that I would assume are going in the process of this. So,
no.
Trouba, Kreider, it's hard to add this up. It really does need to be prospects filled through the grain. If Zibanejad was like a very similar situation like Eichel, younger, big contract, but maybe you do a flop because both of them just don't want to stay with their respective clubs, or like the Laine and Dubois deal. Like that made a lot of sense at the time. Both really good players, stars in their careers. They're still trying to put things together, didn't like where they were and couldn't agree on a contract, so they just flip them 1 for 1. That would make more sense from the Rangers' perspective, but it's not. That's not how things are looking right now. So I don't know. The Rangers would have to get creative. I think that maybe would be part of a 3-team trade even. And the Rangers maybe sway a club that has a more coveted prospect that could go Buffalo's way. And in return, maybe the Rangers give up a first-round pick. Or maybe they give up a more desirable player of their own to make things happen. Like a Buchnevich at the right price. Like something along those lines.
The other scenario is, of course, that they trade prospects to Buffalo for Eichel. And then they trade Zibanejad to the Vegas Golden Knights, for instance. I'm just naming a random team, for a first-round pick and Peyton Krebs, or for a second-round pick and Cody Glass. A similar trade to what they did with Brassard for Zibanejad. You trade away your established center for a younger guy you hope steps up and steps into that role. A year and a half ago, I was advocating for making that trade, Zibanejad for Rupe Hintz, who plays for the Dallas Stars. I think that has sailed now because Rupe Hintz is producing at a rate where he's more valuable than he was a year and a half ago. So we missed the boat on that one. But that's the type of trade they could be looking for if they're going for Eichel, replace Zibanejad with a younger player, and then trade Zibanejad for futures. But honestly, if I was the general manager, and we should probably be happy I'm not, I wouldn't go after Jack Eichel, because I think the price it takes to acquire him plus the cap hit just doesn't make him the most appealing center in the league to go after.
Yeah, no, there's obvious concerns with Eichel, and don't get me wrong, I will take him any and every day of the week. But you have the injuries, you have the serious injury that he's coming off of this season.
Yeah, I'm not even talking about injuries. I'm talking about the $10 million cap hit for 5 years after this season, plus all the asset it takes to acquire him.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Is the additional cap hit and giving up all those prospects worth the upgrade you're getting? How big is the upgrade going from Zibanejad to Eichel? How big is that upgrade?
And that's a gamble
maybe that upgrade is only big in years 3 and 4. Is that worth it? I don't know. Maybe, and I'm not going to talk about Barkov because he might not hit free agency, but Elias Lindholm of the Calgary Flames is a guy that I would target instead of Eichel. He's not as flashy as Eichel, but he won't be as expensive.
You're right, but what are you trying to do with Lindholm then? Because are you telling me you want to get rid of Zibanejad to bring in a Lindholm? Would that be something you consider?
If you acquire Lindholm, it's much easier to fit him under the cap. You might not have to get rid of Zibanejad.
Correct, but then you have this guy called Ryan Strome. So you want Lindholm to possibly be your third C?
I mean, if
Beatles like, hey, come on, dude, I'm only like
22. I'm just thinking out loud here. You have 3 really good centers. I mean, what's the harm? You need depth, and I would much rather go for a guy like Lindholm than go for a guy like Jack Eichel, considering everything it costs to get him, because you're also looking at making room for him financially.
And that's something you're always going to have to work around every
Yes.
single season throughout his contract.
And we have to understand that we have a lot of entry-level contracts coming up in the next couple of years.
And they don't last forever.
Shesterkin is restricted free agent this summer. He's gonna ask for quite a lot of money. He has arbitration. He's arbitration eligible. Next year, Adam Fox. What's Adam Fox gonna ask for? What's Adam Fox getting?
That Foxy is one I'm really interested on, considering his connection with the Rangers.
$8 million a year for Adam Fox.
Foxy, though, I will just add that is another situation that may very well benefit the Rangers again. Kind of how Tampa's been doing things and proving everyone wrong and being able to keep these guys on either shorter term contracts or just low AAV contracts because they love being there. Foxy, all he wanted to be was a Ranger, and now he's thriving with the Rangers in the heart of their rebuild as they're blossoming up. Granted, I don't know him personally. Could he pull something like he did up until the Rangers, where now that he's had a taste with them, he's like, okay, I want a big payday regardless of who it's with to an extent? Sure. I think that's going to happen, though I don't. So I think the Rangers actually may benefit more again in this situation with Foxy because they are, in fact, the New York Rangers.
Maybe. But it's getting really hard to fit all these players under the cap when you already have Trouba at $8 million and Kreider at 6.5 and Panarin at 11.6 and whatever Buchnevich is getting. And whatever's advantage.
Buch is I'm thinking right now. Buch is making like $3 million this season. Yeah. Right around there. Yeah. So
$6 million a year, probably.
Yep.
On his next deal. Zibanejad is unrestricted free agent next year, which means they'll start negotiations this summer. I mean, that cap hit, that cap space evaporates so quickly. Yes, we have some buyouts coming off the cap, which is great, but it's going straight into these young contracts. These young players can get a second contract. I honestly don't see a scenario where Eichel comes to the Rangers and they're not trading away a big piece in a different trade. And unfortunately, Kreider and Trouba have no move clauses. So does Panarin. So who are you going to trade away? It's going to be Buchnevich and or Zibanejad to accommodate Eichel being on the team.
Granted, they do have no move clauses, but I don't believe it's impossible to deal them. But it all goes through them, though. That's the thing. They have all the control in the situation.
Gaborik waived his to go to Columbus, and then he won a year later with LA. So it's possible. It's not impossible. But it's also something you need to keep in mind that they have these clauses for a reason. They negotiated these clauses for a reason. Jacob Trouba negotiated this clause. He lives in New York. His girlfriend works in New York.
Yeah, he doesn't want to go anywhere. We know
he probably doesn't want to go. If anything, and we'll probably should wrap it up after I go through this little rant, but if anything, I think in 2 years, Chris Kreider is a perfect trade candidate going to what I call a tax haven. If you look at the Vegas Golden Knights with Max Pacioretty, the Dallas Stars with Joe Pavelski, the Tampa Bay Lightning with they're losing Alex Killorn. So they have money coming off the books. They should be able to fit him under the cap. Financially, it's beneficial for Kreider. In 2 years, all these teams will still be contenders. So I wouldn't be shocked if Kreider waives his no move clause for the right team.
I wouldn't be either. I think the biggest thing about that, however, is how adamant the Rangers would be in trying to deal him. If the Rangers kind of, maybe not that I would want this. This is the absolute opposite thing that I would want. But if it was a scenario where they maybe mistreat him, because as we know with this rebuild and between Zuccarello, Hayes, they definitely rubbed off some guys the wrong way, but they committed to Kreider. So they would kind of have to do a fairly 180. They would have to try to do their best to give Kreider a damn good reason on why he should leave, because they don't want him there. And that's a sucky thing to do, but that's part of business.
It is, and it is a business, and that's what it always comes down to. And I'm not saying that Kreider is going to just accept waiving his no move clause, but if I have to put money on either Kreider or Trouba, my money's on Kreider. If I have to choose one of those two, I don't see Trouba waiving at all because of his personal situation. I'm not too familiar with Kreider's personal situation. I don't know what his girlfriend or wife is doing for him, but he doesn't have kids. It might be just easier for him to move,
Kreider looks like the most susceptible in my mind. Trouba, honestly, not. I hope it doesn't happen. I hope that he performs and can live up to that contract at some point. But he smells buyout Rin all over it at some point. Whether that's in the 3 years from now, I have no clue. I know that's a big hit. Don't get me wrong, but something tells me that unless Trouba really proves his worth and worth that contract, the Rangers will get to a point of almost desperation where they just try to do everything they can to get rid of it because they're going to be so loaded up at some point with guys that fill in for him.
You're going to have Fox and Lundqvist and Schneider.
And Schneider is literally he looks like a Trouba replacement in more ways than one.
Yeah.
So, but
speaking of Schneider, he's having a really good season in the WHL. And
yes, the captain for the Wheat Kings.
The last thing I want to quickly touch on, we all know that he played a couple of games in the AHL earlier this season, as did a lot of other junior players that usually would not be eligible. Seth Jarvis, a first-round pick for the Carolina Hurricanes. Yeah, I think the Carolina Hurricanes picked him. All these kids, like 18, 19-year-old kids, are playing in the AHL this season because of the pandemic. And not only are they able to keep up, they are actually dictating games. They are dominating shifts in the AHL at age 18, 19, which got me thinking, because 18, 19-year-olds from junior hockey are not eligible to play in the AHL normally because of an agreement between the NHL and the CHL. Maybe it's time they should review that agreement and make an exception for first-round picks or something. Because if you pick a player 10th overall and he plays for the Portland Winterhawks, Seth Jarvis, for instance, and he has nothing left to prove in the WHL, he still has to play in the WHL for 2 years unless he has a spot on your NHL team.
Yep.
And it's much more beneficial for the player's development, for the team that drafted him, to let him play in the AHL. I know they don't want to have a complete exodus.
Okay.
A complete exodus of players, but make an exception for first-round picks. Let first-round picks from junior hockey play in the AHL. That's it. And Brayden Schneider's performance in the AHL got me thinking, and then, yeah.
And look, defensemen normally take a little bit while to develop, as we know. But even in a case where he's a little fast, it's not the end of the world if you kind of need to have him in the AHL. As long as he is understand and is working fine with the organization, knowing that his time will come, it's just going to take a little bit because of how loaded up the Rangers are. That's not uncommon. It happens with teams all the time in the league. So as long as he can bite the bullet there and just stay professional and know that good things are going to come just at the right time, then that's fine. He could very well be guaranteed a spot, but it's like, hey, you're guaranteed a spot, but we just need this to happen, or we need to wait for this year. Something along those lines.
They create a rule that each NHL team can have maximum two players on their AHL farm team from juniors.
That would be nice.
Make it an exception. In the Rangers' case this season, it probably would have been Robertson and Schneider, and Garand and Cooley would not have been eligible then.
Yeah.
But do something, because these players are just playing playing junior hockey at age 19 when they are. Matt Barzal was drafted 16th overall. He had nothing left to prove in Seattle. I watched him play every game. I'm a Thunderbirds fan. I watched him play every game. He was putting up 3-4 point nights without even trying. There was nothing left for him to do there. So they need to do something.
I agree with you. But here, before we get out of here, though,
exciting prospect. So,
Steve, let's do a quick prediction on next week's games, okay? Before we head out of here. Okay. So the Rangers' schedule for next week, guys, is the following. Colleen, it might even be today at the time you guys see this. Probably will be this Tuesday against the Islanders on the island, and then Thursday, the first of a back-to-back, both home games for the Rangers against the Flyers. I'm looking forward to those. And then Sunday against the Buffalo Sabres. My prediction right off the bat is 3-1. Gut feeling. What are you going with, Steven?
They play 3 games at home and 1 on the island. I think I'm going to go 3-1. I think they're going to lose to the Sabres.
Something tells me they might lose at least one of the back-to-backs to the Flyers, strictly because it's back-to-back.
Yeah, it's a valid point, even though we just won a back-to-back against the Devils, but whatever.
Oh, no, you're right. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying. I'd rather pick something like that than a sweep, and then the sweep is
far less likely to happen. We have another 8-goal game against the Flyers.
I guess we'll have to wait till Thursday to find out. So 3-1 for me, 3-1 for you, Steven. I like it. I hope those odds come to fruition. The Rangers, again, guys, are only 2 games out at the time recording this to the Boston Bruins. They're clawing at it. They really are. All they need is to continue this streak, which is not easy. Don't get me wrong. But the Rangers have another hot week and Boston goes 500 or lower, they could very well find themselves within a game or tied in points sooner than later. So fingers crossed. I'm really, really hoping at this point. Again, I think that they'll just miss or make it, as we all kind of predicted. Fingers crossed that they continue this push. And hopefully everyone just continues to click, right? But before we get out of here, Steven, is there anything else that you'd like to add in this long episode here at Rangers Review?
I think the Bruins are going to finish ahead of the Islanders.
Okay, that's not that uncommon. Who knows? Could the Rangers find themselves in a situation where if they make playoffs, maybe they somehow, some way get past the Islanders? Maybe. It's a tall task. It's a tall task. But we'll see. We'll see.
Way, if we make the playoffs, we'll have a first round against the Capitals.
We have first round against the Caps?
Because they're probably going to win the division.
Is it foolish of me to say I'm not all that worried?
Ooh, against the Capitals. To be fair, they did make one of the worst trades in recent years. I still don't understand that trade, but I guess Anthony Mantha works for them.
Yeah, I don't know. I like the Caps. Don't get me wrong. They're in win now. They very well could push and win the cup this year. We'll see what happens, but I don't know. The Rangers normally have a good number against the Caps. They know how to execute on them. It's just really all that matters to me if the Rangers make playoffs is that we don't see a sweep like we did last year. Not even making playoffs. If they can show progression, that's what matters most to me.
One more prediction for this week. Which game is Zach Jones going to make his NHL debut?
Zach Jones is going to make his NHL debut against either the Thursday or the Friday game against the Flyers. Because I had a bold prediction that maybe we could see him in one of the back-to-backs this weekend. That didn't happen. But a back-to-back just kind of feels right to me because it makes sense if you just want to rest a guy. Even if you have a win. Like, the Rangers won 4 straight and they still had Hayek out yesterday.
So Friday?
What's that?
The Friday game?
Friday game? I'll go with that Friday game. Why not?
I'll go against the Sabres then for Zach Jones.
Okay. Well, who knows? Maybe it's going to be today once this video comes out. We'll find out, right? But again, I'm excited. I'm excited to see Zach Jones. I'm excited to see how the Rangers finish off the last decent amount of games, but they're under 20 games now. They're closer to 10 than they are 20. So a lot of things to be excited about for the Rangers. And again, thank you all so much, Rangers fans, for chiming into this week's segment of Rangers Review. We'll be back in right around a week or so stay tuned for that, guys. And as always, let's go Rangers.
Let's go Rangers.